Dear friends, what a joy to scroll through and see you. Some of you I can't see so much, but I love the screensavers you've got up. So as Marnie said, thank you, Marnie. It's a joy that you've invited Sangha Live and then Larry and I into your living room. And I love getting a peek at your living room. And I think we have a few dogs and cats here. That's good. Ours is sleeping. I hope he stays that way. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a grounding, short meditation, a talk, and then we're gonna, oh, wow, I just got big. And then we're gonna capture Q&R. We don't like to say we've got answers, but we do have a response, and we will have a response. So as we begin, I invite you to settle and drop in right where you are. This is one of those times that I like to tune into the land ancestors. And Larry and I are coming you from the beginning of the Trail of Tears, Arden, North Carolina, in the United States. Our soil here is very red and dry. Notice that, the land of the Cherokee, where I'm standing, where I'm seated. And I have friends that have taught me about basket weaving, so that's what I think of. Notice what you notice as you connect your feet to the land where you are in this moment. Larry and I like to teach with the wheel of the year, and we're moving into the equinox, 22nd. That's North America. South America, I know you're looking forward to spring. Okay, and we're going to continue to ground using Master Dogen, Japanese Zen master. Become aware of the vertical energy running through your body, earth to sky, sky to earth. Just imagine that your head can kind of touch a cloud there. So without straining your neck, there's a little bit of lift in the neck and a lift in the vertebrae. Notice what you notice as you ground in this moment. I often notice that I'm a little more aware of my shoulders and neck, and also my lower legs. Just notice what you notice. And since you're muted, this is a good time to breathe and breathe out with an audible sigh. Just as you make space with your breath, vertical energy running through the whole body. Earth to sky, sky to earth. Good. Now the vertical energy running through the sides of the body. This is what connects us to each other. So you might get a sense of, wow, we've got 84 people in this moment. We're in a big circle. This is what connects us to rocks and trees, other people. birds and plants. I'm aware of the side seams of the body. Noticing what you notice. Might get more of a sense of your bum on the chair and the thighs there, feet on the ground. Always aware of my shoulders and hips a little more with the horizontal energy that connects us. Very good. Now the front and back, and you can tip a little bit forward and backward real slowly, and then just imagine leaning into the back side of the body. Culturally, in the United States at least, we tend to forget about the backside. And then find your midpoint. When I lean back, I make a point of connecting in with my ancestors. It helps that I'm in front of an ancestor altar. There they are. There we are. Good. Now, whole body right here. Get a sense of the whole shape of your body, space you take in the room. Now we're just going to drop into a little silence together, inviting your whole body to soften, soft belly, breathing into the front and back side of the heart. Relaxing even more. With the next few breaths, just soak in anything that is good, any goodness. Mindfulness is a bright, sparkling light. Just imagine that sparkling light sinking into your head and face, shoulders, neck, torso. And anything else can go with the out breath, just letting it go. Okay, and then taking your time, gently come on back. Can't get my original sound to change, so no bell. You'll have to hear a bell in your mind, maybe a favorite bell, and stretch. Whatever movement feels good to your body. Taking your time to come back and bring Larry up. I'm gonna see everybody. I can change it. I'm gonna see yourself, everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, a couple pages.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you all. A poem for you to begin. Take a few breaths. Let them be. Take a few breaths and let them be. As you relax into the working ground of your ancestors. Ancestors of land, blood, and spirit. Look within with a clear mind. Watch the stream of memories, thoughts, fears, disappointments, anger, and wonder flow by. Breathe. 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 Receive and reclaim your spacious heart. And let what is most vivid melt away into emptiness. Holy emptiness. Hold on to nothing, yet embrace everything as you fall into the river of goodness hidden in your bones. Flowing always toward the ocean of strength, forgiveness, and grace. At this time of the year, in many parts of the world, including where we are located, I am located now, the fall has begun. And this has been in many places I have lived and worked over the years. We have entered into preparation, if not the action, of harvest time. We're mostly familiar with the machines and the crops and the baskets and towers of fruits and vegetables that get collected, get gathered, get stored. Even in a small garden in your backyard, there is harvesting. the process of reaping the benefits of what has been planted. Harvesting the good, knowing how to do that on a regular basis, is extremely important for your well-being. I've discovered it is very valuable for my own wellness and health in a really deep way. So I want to talk a little bit about that. It begins with how we practice with our attention, where we put our attention, and how we put our attention on things, on objects, on thoughts, on feelings, positive, negative, or neutral. We're always about the business of the human being of placing our attention on something, on breakfast, on lunch, on dinner. It's just ordinary. But the capacity to what we pay attention to can go deeper. There's a term in the Buddhist tradition called Yoni So Maskara and Yoni So Maskara. And it's translated as wise attention and unwise attention. So I want to make sure as we do this process, which Peggy's already begun in a beautiful way for us, that we focus our attention on what is wise. You know, you can harvest what is not helpful inside of yourself. There's a time in I'm old, so I remember a time in the 80s when the way everybody introduced themselves was what was wrong with them. and what a failure they were and how incomplete their emotional existence was. That I would call unwise attention. That is planting more fruits of your own suffering. Yes, you have suffering in your life, but it's another thing to constantly harvest it, because what it does is it replants itself and grows. When we practice wise attention, we put our attention on what has been wholesome in our experience. For me, I ask, where have I experienced in my life kindness? And not just the act of kindness, but to be with those acts often enough in myself that I can feel the energy of them. I can feel the well-wishingness of those acts of kindness. I put my attention on when have I experienced compassion and how in my life. Wise attention. How and when have I experienced sheer joy? When have I been happy in the company of friends, family, mentors? And when have I experienced the goodness of peacefulness? So these are some of the questions I ask myself every day, so I don't lose touch with the value I have experienced of being in this world. I'm clear I've experienced suffering, but I'm also clear I have experienced non-suffering. So in harvesting goodness, you want to place your attention, my attention, on what nourishes me as I remember. So I'm going to take you through a few examples. Some of you may have heard this before. If you have, you have. I was, according to my grandmother, who is Ali Tyndall, who passed away many years ago, told me this story. So I'm sharing with you what I'm getting ready to say. I heard from her. I have no personal knowledge up to a certain point. I was adopted when I was 8 months old. I spent the first 8 months in Cleveland Clinic Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. I have no idea before that what happened, how I got there. I do remember being in the hospital, and I remember was fundamentally a challenge of being alone with strangers and dealing with pain by myself, physical pain by myself. But I also remember the nurses and doctors who brought in the energy of kindness, who brought in the dignity of professionalism. I still remember that, and I remember that in my body. I am still benefiting from the energy of their kindness, even at this very moment. I'm not separated from that. This is how we harvest the good. Practice wise attention on your memories because they are treasures. Not that everything is perfect. We already know that. That's not what the practice is. The practice is to nourish yourself enough so you have the energy and capacity to transform your suffering and not get stuck in it. So Ollie Tyndall and her husband, Marion, were the people who gave the family that adopted me a place to stay in their attic until they could save enough money to rent a house. And so I grew up in this awareness and this sense of generosity, of real caring. I didn't know anything was different until the day the paperwork came in to change my name to the family that had just adopted me. I never wondered about who or what or why. I just went on with my life, paying attention to the kindness I was receiving, the care I was receiving, the respect I was receiving. And that was Roy and Val Ward. I also, there's a pastor at my Presbyterian church many years ago named Roger Schaup, who was intent on getting me to go into Presbyterian seminary. he bought me a whole library of the whole history of all the major books and everything in the Christian tradition, which was great because I love that tradition and I love libraries. And his diligence in expecting or no less of me than the very best. And so I have no idea where he is or what happened to him, but I still cherish that energy exchange. I still cherish that moment, not as a separate self, but as a moment that is empty, meaning open to continuous experience of his goodness. Like I can still taste my grandmother's potato salad. I can still remember being in the kitchen with her to help make it. And as I remember that, I remember the little kitchen with the red table that only 3 or 4 of us could sit at, and the sheer joy she had of cutting up potatoes. and so learn what to relish in what you remember. Too many of us are preoccupied, in my opinion, with remembering what we should not be relishing. I don't mean to forget. I mean to remember, to understand, so we can love. And the practice of harvesting to me is building up my love muscle, if you will, so I can handle my suffering with dignity, honor, and liberation. Not hide from it, but be bigger than it, be larger than it. There's a great story in Buddhism about the Buddha's journey in the forest as he woke up. And Mara, the devil, had assembled an army full of arrows, archers, and they shot the arrows at the Buddha just as he was waking up. And as the closer the arrows got, they turned into flowers. And I thought, boy, I want to live like that. That sounds really, really great to me. And so I harvest the goodness of my life so that any arrows coming at me from wherever turn into flowers before they arrive. And so I am safe. I do not live in fear. I take up no residence there. All because I'm continuing to learn how to harvest the goodness I've received in my life. Think of it as do a little journal work one day on who has given you a leg up in your life. Who has really helped you? And it can be simple things, it can be big things. I think of Mrs. Fox, a friend of my mother, who was a school teacher. And this was in the late 50s, early 60s. She was always very professionally dressed. I never saw her any other way than a school teacher. And she used to buy a sherbet and make these sodas, ice cream sodas out. It was so good. And how she just shared without asking for anything in return. So I'm remembering being with a person of that heart, of that quality of heart. And when I remember that, I remember also I have a chance to be that. So when we harvest, we are taking into ourselves the fruit of what we have received. And so who is it who's giving you a leg up? I had a great doctorate chair named William Chu from Taiwan. And he was, besides, a double degree, whatever, from UCLA, plus a Buddhist Dharma teacher, etc. He was a magnificent teacher of meditation. And I learned so much from him about meditation, even though I have been meditating for years. And he was also someone in my life who never expected any less than 100%. Once I did my dissertation, he thought it would be a good idea for me to translate from the original Pali, the first teaching the Buddha did on the 5 remembrances, the 5 precepts. And so what I appreciated about it, I first thought this guy is trying to work me to death. And as I did that translation from Pali language into English, I discovered something about the 5 mindfulness trainings, or the 5 precepts, as we call them in the Western world and other parts of the world. I discovered that the Buddha's approach was non-dogmatic, non-authoritarian, and very experientially based. There's a young man who came to the Buddha and asked several questions. One was, how do I make sure I don't get into trouble in my life? And the Buddha said, well, if you want to stay out of trouble in your life, it's probably not a good idea to be wandering around at 3 o'clock in the morning, wherever you are. He didn't tell him what to do, what not to do. You might want to consider this. And so as we nourish ourselves, we always have the option of learning what we might want to consider from our own harvest, from our parents, from our friends, from our teachers, from our mentors, even from strangers. Of course, I've been fortunate enough to have a 30-year relationship with Thich Nhat Hanh, and which is still going on. And he was always my friend, without being personal. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I always knew he was a refuge. when our house was bombed by the Aryan Nation in Idaho years and years ago, we were fortunate enough to be able to go straight to Plum Village. And when we got there, he spent a whole day with us, asking how we were, how our pet, how our dog was, and concluded generally by saying that was a horrible thing that happened to you, but it did. And it is an indication of the work that needs to be done. So take a rest and then let's get to it. And the harvest here for me is, yes, you can experience difficulty. There's no escape from that. You can even experience tragedy. There's no escape from that in human life. But there's always a possibility of how we relate to that, how we choose to have the experience we just had. That is where our liberation lies. Our liberation is not in not having horrible things happen, but in knowing how to handle ourselves when horrible things do happen. The same thing can be true when non-horrible things happen. You know, some people think only tragedies can derail a life. A life can be derailed by great possibility. You've heard stories of people winning the lottery and then having a horrible life. Life has to do with how we relate to it, not simply what we experience. To harvest is to understand that I never see the world how it is. I only see the world how I am. If I was going to be a political character, I would say that's the most important thing to understand about Donald Trump. The world he sees is his own inner world and projects the movie to us. We must understand this. All over the world, we must understand and we must elevate our wisdom of mental wellness. We have to be trained in what it means to be well. We have so much conditioning around our acceptance of what is unwell in the mind, whatever the cause. We have shunned people away. We have had jokes about mental illness, so much so that even the most subtlest form of it cannot be acknowledged in ourselves, among ourselves. And we tend to create each other with cruelty here. This is another reason harvesting the good is so important, so that you wire your brain, you set your neurons in motion to harvest what is good. You create a structure, a network of brain neurons that know how to experience gratitude, that know how to receive and not just give. I was in Vietnam with Thich Nhat Hanh once for Buddha's birthday celebration in Hanoi with UNESCO, about 5,000 people and from all over Asia. And I went simply because he asked me to. And he gave the opening talk to this hall of many, many practitioners, mostly monastics, and finished. And we went through the rest of the week for the rest of breakout groups, et cetera, et cetera. And we're about one day from the closing, and he came up to me and said, you know, I did the opening talk, but I don't want to do the closing talk. I think you should do you should do the closing talk. And so I harvest that experience in many ways for me. It was when I first heard people say, could he be a Buddhist? And what I discovered about Buddhism when I lived in India in 1970s It was that the Buddha was a human being. We have so misunderstood what we are that we cannot benefit from fully what we are. I discovered in Calcutta, where I was living and working in the poorest neighborhood of Calcutta, that the Buddha was a human being. Now, I knew that, but I really didn't know that. I thought the Buddha was only Indian. I did not realize that the Buddha was a state of mind, the awakening state, the harvesting state, the state of kindness, the state of compassion, the state of mind of joy, and the state of mind of peace in the midst of suffering. So as you journal sometimes on this matter, or think of it or contemplate more on this matter, who's given you a leg up in your life? I had a school teacher named sixth grade, Mr. Posey, quite a proper Englishman. He always had his hush puppies on and his tweed jacket. And the first day of English, he said to all of us, if you want to get an A in this class, you have to read a book every week. So I thought, all right, I know what to do. And so I did. And I fell in love with reading. I fell in love with learning. I fell in love with libraries. I'm sure I would not have gone into the PhD program if it hadn't been for Mr. Posey. This is what I mean by harvesting. Write it down, name it. What gift did you receive? What fruit did you receive from your grandmother or grandfather or any of your ancestors, or the gifts and treasures that are there for you in the ancestors of this land, which are profoundly remarkable. One year, Peggy and I were living in Claremont, California, and participating in an indigenous event. And part of the process was a ceremony in which we got wrapped in eagle wings. I cannot tell you what an awesome experience it is to be wrapped in the wings of an eagle that are bigger than you. All of a sudden, you're just inside this cocoon. And my respect for the eagle world, the world of the flying ones who look over us, even in our unknowing, is a remarkable partner in the world to be with. So name your fruits. Look back through your life. You already know how to shop. You know, people say, well, I can't do things. That's not true. You already know how to shop. So I'm just talking about shopping with your mind and with your heart to harvest the very best of your own human experience. And I know it may not be all that you wanted or all that I wanted, but in the Buddhist sense, since there is no I, that's not a problem. Look at your ancestors. What did they transmit to you? What fruits of their life are you still benefiting from? I did a project with Hewlett Packard once to spin off a new company in Germany, in Frankfurt. And I was teamed up with a young man named Hayo, great character, dad, and he loved his son. He was telling me all about his life. We had meals together. He took me to his house, and when we entered the house, he said, you know, this is my grandfather's house. I'm benefiting from my grandfather's house. He was very aware of how that gift changed his life. how that tradition shaped what he could do for his own son and for his family. Look at what you've been given, however small, and understand that everything that is small is also large. The YN tradition of Japan has a great teaching on inside the very small is the very large. And inside the very large is the very small. It sounds like quantum science, even though it came out much earlier. So know what goodness is in your bones. Don't ever get confused about that. In order not to be confused about that, just like farming and just like taking care of plants in the house, you have to water them. You have to care for them. You have to give them nourishment. You have to give them space. You have to give them memory so they stay alive in you. Of course, the other thing that's important about harvesting is what we do with the harvest once we have it. There have been traditions, indigenous traditions, which at the end of the year would see who had the most bounty, the most fruit, the biggest festival occurred, and the people who had the most gave the most. It's alien to our concept of being in the world today. But this actually happened. It still does in many places. At harvest time, everybody gets to reap the benefit. So the question for a practitioner is not just how can I harvest what is good for me, but how can I give it away? So I've been asking myself since I was a little boy. I have received so much compassion and so much generosity in my life. How can I give it away? Where can I give it away? And that has taken me to all parts of the world, all kinds of imaginable communities, from rural villages and huts to Fortune 500 companies. I always had the same question. How can the goodness I received be shared? And so one of the reasons we have an altar, one of the reasons in one of my journals I have pictures of my mom and Thich Nhat Hanh, is so I remember what I have received. And there's another secret here. What you have received is not over. What you have received did not have a beginning and did not have an ending. What you have received is empty of a separate existence. Therefore, it is available to you at all times and in all places. It has no walls. It has no lock and key. So even in the most difficult situation, you can touch your goodness. And the more skillful we get in being able to recognize and name and touch and nourish our own goodness, the more it can spill out into history. So that the goodness energy can become a goodness we feel among us and between us. And when we can touch that goodness or be touched by that energy of goodness, we start to understand true joy. That's not an abstraction. Constantly, I experience true joy. But what I've discovered that true joy is shared joy, which is the way it's described in the Brahma Viharas in Buddhism. shared joy. I've discovered in my own practice that joy, when I've experienced the most intense joy, I'm always with others, quote unquote others. But the others may be a tree, the frogs, the turkeys in the neighborhood, the next door neighbor, the people across the river, the clouds, the blue heron, the lily. So that we have a chance to live with this kind of richness running through us 24/7. Or as Gregory Bateson used to say, we end up experiencing our life as a bag of bones, walking around with some big ego on our back.
Skin encapsulated.
A skin encapsulated ego. To harvest is to break through that skin encapsulated ego and realize you have been blessed by the touch of others. Everything has not just been your accomplishment. There is no such thing as just your accomplishment. The great book a few years ago on outliers, and Bill Gates had a great story in it about how he got into computers. He had the good fortune of growing up in a neighborhood that had one of the first computers in a school. He was aware of that. And then he had a teacher who would let him spend extra time fiddling with the computer. That's why we have Microsoft. And of course, there's 100 other factors and conditions that has shaped his life and your life and my life. It's important to know and be able to name those so that we don't get caught in the ego of accomplishment alone. However, we work with our mind and bodies and hearts, that energy spills out of us into the kitchen table, into the school, into the neighborhood, into all of our relationships, including relationship to the earth, as well as the vast majority of humans we do not know. Not to mention all the species that are constantly watching us to see what we're going to do about being on this planet. Let the planet harvest you. It's harvesting all the time. Be part of that process. Here, the leaves are starting to turn already. Slight yellow. The fade has begun. Winter is on the horizon. That's all about the earth's business. So be about the earth's business. The earth recycles herself, recharges herself, reignites herself, recreates herself at every moment. Our greatest difficulties come when we are unable to be in that flow, unable to understand ourselves as a flow that we are living in, that we are conscious of. Harvest the best out of your experience. Harvest the best in your now. And I know sometimes it is not easy to even find the best in yourself, because it's often clouded over with the dark night of the soul. Imagery from St. John of the Cross in the Catholic tradition is often covered over by our trauma. And I don't mean trauma as some weakness. I mean trauma as recognizing that your nervous system has been destabilized. And when you put it that way, you can do something about it. You can learn to restabilize your nervous system. You can learn how to keep it stabilized mostly all the time. You don't have to be a victim. We have to hurt in human experience. You know, as you get older, you go to the doctor more. At least that has been the case for me. And every time I go to the doctor, I'm like, oh man, I got to get hurt again. And this is one of the reasons the first noble truth is about suffering. People have often misunderstood that, I think. Yes, living and dying and illness and sickness is suffering, but that's not the suffering the Buddha is most concerned about, because nothing can be done about that suffering of birth, death, illness, etc. What can be done about it is our relationship to it can change. Our perception of it can change. Our mental states for how we deal with it in our families and in our life can change. Thich Nhat Hanh used to often open up retreats in North America with a question and answer session with children, which was always just wonderful. And one retreat, we were in Colorado, up in Estes Park, I believe. One of the young people asked, if there's so much suffering in the world, why is the Buddha smiling? And Thich Nhat Hanh paused and said, the Buddha is smiling because the Buddha knows how to handle suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh actually has a great talk on that on YouTube. You can look up, in which he talked, the title is, if you know how to suffer, you suffer less. If you know how to be with your pain, be with your heartache, be with the frailty of existence itself, and not attach your ego to it, you suffer less. To understand Buddhism for me is in part the ability to understand the teachings of it as impersonal. Impersonal. I'm of a nature to grow old. That's not Larry's mission. That's a fact of my experience. And so how I relate to this experience is where liberation lies. Is where freedom from being preoccupied with that which I cannot control lies. So I have space in my heart and in my mind to be present to what's happening in my life without being caught by what's happening in my life. How do you want to share your harvest? With whom? In the late 60s, I was in Chicago. I moved there to be on the faculty of the Ecumenical Institute, which was started by the World Council of Churches in 1954. And I joined the staff, and one of the projects we had on the west side is we started a preschool. And we were teaching children that you're beautiful and you could learn and etc. And I tell you, there's nothing more horrifying for me than being in a room with 5-year-olds and there's 50 of them. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen here. Having an agenda is a joke. And but was always pleasurable once I survived it. And 25 years later, I received notes from some of these young people who are lawyers, bankers, proud mothers and fathers, teachers, and social workers, is harvesting. So don't just leave your gold on the track. Don't leave it in the forest or by the stream. Bring it into your life. Whatever those treasures are, you have received and are receiving at this very moment. Know what those are. Do not let yourself be separated from the stream of goodness that's hidden in your bones.
Slide over. Gonna come in
I'm sliding over.
and. There's no way to do this real skillfully.
These chairs are not good.
These chairs are not good. Thanks, Larry. It was a
Sure.
beautiful talk. Marnie, maybe you can help us. I would invite you to put something you're harvesting that you're aware of in this moment into the chat room. And if Marnie, you could help read some of those harvests before we get into Q&R. Just a short note.
Just to clarify, Sangha, you've been invited to post in the chat the response to what are you harvesting? Gifts of understanding, the gifts of where I live, shoulders of my elders. I stand on the shoulders of my elders. I'm harvesting the love and dedication of my parents, the kindness of my Auntie Jane, who made me feel seen and cared for my making me a special cake. The list of who has given me a leg up in life is so very long. I am harvesting healing metta from my Sangha and friendship, the invaluable support of my counselor in 6th grade, the good health and friendship, giving and receiving, the joy and freedom in learning and learning with others, harvesting every moment, this talk and other Buddhist wisdom, harvesting today's wisdom from Larry and Peggy and the kindness of Meredith, a wonderful teacher when I was very young. Ooh, it's moving quickly now. I'll just scroll a little. The gifts of my father, the beauty of fall. Giving things away I no longer need.
Take your time, Marnie. I really want people to digest it.
Okay, I'll go back up.
So this is goodness for us. This is the mudita of sharing, learning together.
Song of the birds and trees, harvesting the goodness of the universe. Buddhist wisdom and the hope to share it with others. That I'm harvesting the gifts of my father, harvesting this dharma talk and session in the beauty of fall. Harvesting my mentor, Linda, who introduced me to meditation and who passed in 2020. Harvesting partnership with my partner and giving away things I no longer need from my home. I will be relocating to a smaller place, harvesting non-attachment. My dear grandfather, who gave me a long letter about what he had learned in life, which I received after his death. My art teacher, who told me I had talent when no one else had. On a lovely walk with a friend and her dog. And I do hope I didn't miss any. Sometimes my chat jumped a little.
Thank you so much. Just take a few breaths and just let some of those sink in. It's another form of harvest is to share goodness in community. It's a close cousin of this is gratitude, right? Can you feel that coming in? Yeah. So at this point, I want to encourage if there's any question or response, and they can go in the chat. You can raise a hand. We're going to collect a few. We're not going to answer them one at a time, but we'll take a few together. I see Plum's got a hand up. And We'll collect maybe 5 questions. Hey, Plum.
Hi, guys. I'm so looking forward to your course. And
Oh, you're coming. Good. Good. We're gonna get to go a little further with 4 sessions. Yay.
Larry, I wrote it down because
Coming in.
it didn't land with clarity when he said it, but he was speaking of what you have received is empty of a separate existence. And I was
Okay, well, we're gonna collect them. So
Okay.
expand on that. The emptiness of a separate existence. I'd love more
No,
clarity.
you got it. I'll have them speak to it, but you got it right, Plum. Thanks. We're gonna collect a few more. And so we're gonna answer a couple questions at once. Anybody else have a question? Raise a hand or put it in the chat. Marnie can help us. Plum's the only one. Oh,
Yeah.
unmute yourself, my dear.
I was trying to bring Victoria on, but somehow her picture and mine,
I didn't think Victoria looked like Marnie. Okay.
I will remove myself, I think. Can I?
Well, that you can stay up there. We can add Victoria.
Well, let me do this.
I thought, boy, that looks like Marnie.
Yeah.
There
You guys
she is.
go on, I'll get rid of myself.
Okay.
Hello, am I there? Oh, I
You're
wish I did
here.
look like I wish I did look like Marnie. I love your smile, Marnie. Your eyes so joyful. It's
Thank
great.
you.
It's great to see you whenever you're hosting. Um, Thank you, both of you. As you know, I love you more than life itself. And I'm so excited about the upcoming course. I'm really looking forward to it. My question is how to balance the harvesting, well, the planting, the cultivating, the nourishing, the harvesting with the weeding. Because there's that famous parable in the Gospels about letting the wheat and the tares grow together, because sometimes you can't tell the difference. And I've had that actual experience in my own garden. I have some things growing now that look gorgeous, but I have this weird feeling that they're weeds. How to balance that so one doesn't get too carried away with the weeding or ignore the weeding too much, and then all of a sudden your whole garden is weeds. Thank you.
Okay. Great question, both Plum and Victoria. Great. Anybody else? We'll take another one and we'll combine them. That's it. Boy, it must have been a super clear talk, Larry. Let's see. Yeah.
Just to help, if anyone's on the new version of Zoom, it's going to be under that heart icon called React. That's how you'll raise your digital hand. So I see Liz. Liz is here. I'll bring Liz on now.
Okay. Hey, Liz.
Hey, it took me a while to find that hand down there. I was like, oh. I'm not sure how to express this, but I will start. Larry, you spoke to sometimes the trauma in a life kind of covers over some of the ability to see these gifts or these goodness to be harvested. And I've often noticed when I'm in a meeting or place or a session and I'm asked to look at goodness or to look for these things in my life that are goodness, that my immediate body response to that is tightening. And then it's like an inability to even see anything positive. Like I have and then I just feel kind of like a nauseous feeling. And then I go breathe through that. And I just think, I just wanted to bring that up because it happens a lot. So I wanted to see if you could speak to that, getting beyond that trauma response, maybe. I don't know if that's what but it feels like a trauma response. Anyways, thank you.
Thanks, Liz, for your question.
Okay.
And I think that's 3, and we've only got 14 minutes
That's
left,
good.
so that's probably, we'll take these 3 and
There's
combine
a
them.
there's a couple in the chat. Do you want to
Oh.
do those after?
Yeah, no, quick, we can do quick, maybe one more.
Okay. So this was kind of on the same note. This person says, I focus on the bitter harvest humanity has left as a legacy. And then the dharma of interconnectedness seems so obvious now, but how and why was I deceived into thinking that my success was only from my effort, born and raised in Connecticut?
Okay, how was I to see? That's a great question. Thank you. Okay, well, go ahead, Marnie, do the other one. Might as well take it all.
That was that. And then there's just a general one. Who is the bodhisattva behind you?
Oh, this is Maitreya. Loving kindness. Is she beautiful? Okay, where you want to start? I've got.
I'll start
Plums.
with emptiness.
Okay, with plums.
The classic definition of emptiness in Buddhism has the characteristics of interpenetration and interaction, not simply interlinkage. Some people only assume emptiness to be, oh, we're connected. No, we're not just connected. We are fabricated out of the same stuff, is what emptiness finally means. And it also means that whatever treasure we have is also impermanent. It has the capacity of changing and being transmitted to you as a gift from the source of itself. And emptiness also means a non-separate self, means that no one owns it. Tibetans like to talk about no owner. And when you experience that, the gift or treasure you have received can become yours to embody, to share, and to shape into ways of giving it that are appropriate for the world you're in now. We received lots of treasures from our ancestors, but they were in a particular time and place. The question is how to take the treasures and bring them into the present moment, to use the language of Thich Nhat Hanh. So emptiness does not mean nothing is there. That's a total misinterpretation of Buddhism. Emptiness means everything is there. All of life is there. And the gifts you have received can travel through time and through space. And they have traveled through time and space, or you or I would not be here. Now, I remember a story of Michael Jordan when he received one of his first awards, and he held up his hands and talked about, these are my father's hands. I received these hands from my father. And that's what has made me a fabulous basketball player. That is interbeing. That is awareness of non-self or non-ego definition of oneself. For the,
I'll go into Liz's. And
okay, great.
I'm going to start with Liz's, and it's going to move into Victoria's question. Liz, great practice that you're aware of what comes up. So first of all, you want to stop a second and appreciate your mindfulness practice that's giving you this attention to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So to name it like you've done, be kind, breathe, and just hold yourself with something like that. I usually put a hand on my heart and a hand on my belly. And just keep breathing and then see what happens next with your body. What will help you with the next, whatever next means. But that's where we start. And we harvest too. That also is a harvest to get in touch with the suffering. So breathing in, breathing out. My name. Okay, there's a little nauseous. I'm gonna need to do something else. Breathing in, breathing out. And really to transmit the kindness and tenderness to whatever you discover. Anything you want to add to that?
Just that this auto response is, for me, connected to a couple of things. One is we are neurologically, through evolution, predisposed
Yeah.
to reactivity, because quick reaction is what has kept us alive, to speak of our species. And so we're coded with that. We're wired for that quick reaction. We're also wired with negativity bias. What might threaten us, what might create fear in us or anxiety, we are wired to consider that first. We see that first, we hear that first, we smell that first. Danger. That's our amygdala function in our brain through our whole body system. And then the second part of this, for me, is conditioning. How we have been conditioned to respond to deeper levels of life. Many of us grew up in a time when going deep was a comic routine, with, of course, unawareness about what going deep meant. And so understand how you've been conditioned. What happened around your kitchen table as you were growing up, or at your church, or at your synagogue, or at your mosque, or at your temple? How were you taught to expect this or that, to see this or that, to be comfortable with different feelings? How were you taught? And most often we have been taught that different feelings mean we did something bad instead of we're human. and so really pay attention to how you've been conditioned, and to be able to ask yourself with courage, is that helpful now? It's happening now. You receive it in the now. But as it subsides, you're able to ask yourself, do I have to ride this wave? Or can I just let it be? As part of the ocean.
Back to thank you, Larry.
Sure.
With Victoria, to me, that's more, it's also advanced practice, is to bring in and look and see what I'm gardening. And a lot of the Buddhist teachings involve the gardening metaphor. So you're going to find a lot of help here with this, and to see whether it's time to weed or harvest. That comes through your practice body, that you will understand, because you'll how am I doing inside? What is being called for in me right now? And you'll hear it in your meditation or in your dreams or when you walk. You gotta do some weeding or harvest, or, and what do you want to say?
For me, the important thing here is to not get caught in dualism. There's some nutriments in the weeds that are feeding the beauty of the flowers. It's important to remember that. And some things that start as flowers can turn into weeds. And so you're dealing with a living process. And so I think it's important not to get caught in good flower, bad flower, but to understand the garden is a whole system, and that in a whole system to be healthy requires care for the whole thing, rather than dividing it up into this or that. Care for the whole. Sometimes it's weeding, sometimes it's not. And so either way, you're caring for the garden of your life.
There's a comment about focusing on the bitter harvest and the ways we've been deceived. I think you've kind of spoken to that, but
this is also connected to me for and conditioning. Not a lot of us have been taught a lot about what the Buddha has taught about conditioning, and how to liberate ourselves from how we've been conditioned. But 3 ways to think about that generally, simply. How have you been conditioned to think? In my life, I've always had this weird whatever, where I'm able to, the question comes up in my mind, why would you think that way? Well, it's the first conversation I had with my father about some religious things. I was like, why would you think that? Why would you think that way? And it wasn't a judgment, it's just, wow. So be able to do that with yourself. Whenever a thought comes up, whatever that thought is, take no hostage, just always investigate it. Never take it for granted that it is correct. Second thing is speech. The language you use is reprograms yourself and your nervous system and your brain and your perception with every word. So start to pay attention to how you talk to yourself. An old associate of mine, acquaintance, wrote a book a long time ago called Self-Talk. And in this book, his name was Marty Selman. And in this book, he had done the research that shows we usually, on average, we talk to ourselves when we talk to anyone. And out of a day, if we have 5,000 words, 1,000 of those words went to somebody else, 4,000, we were talking to ourselves. And so how we speak to ourselves is the essence of how we perceive things. So check your language. Check with how things have been framed. Like in a newspaper or in a movie where you see a scene, pay attention to how your language creates a scene of your perception and reveals that back to you. And be able to ask yourself, is this what I'm seeing? And if it is, why? It didn't just happen out of nowhere. And the third one is to be aware of your habit energy, behaviorally. What things do you do on automatic pilot? And what I try to do, as often as I can remember it, I try to shake up my automatic patterns. I drive to work a different way. I walk a different way. I eat with my left hand instead of my right hand. I do little things to disrupt my habit energy. Sometimes it's postponing what you do to a later date. Sometimes it's doing it earlier. Sometimes it's doing it later. Don't get fixated. Be fluid, I think, is the key to this. Fluidity in your mind and fluidity in your emotions, which Thich Nhat Hanh used to talk about as recycling. Emotions are not bad. They are part of being human, one of the richest parts of being human. The important thing about emotions is to let them recycle, let them flow, let them be themselves. Don't build a monument, a gigantic structure that freezes your emotion in one spot. Or you cut your beautiful self off from your own beauty.
Well, thanks. We're just about at time. Yeah, we are at time almost. Want to thank you for your presence and practice and your bringing your light into the world. Thank you for these great questions. We hope you'll come to our course on fear. We're going to do, that's 4 weeks. And our website, we've got a course coming up called Anamkara, Soul Friend. We've really been working with that as a staff of how to help teach how to hold our clay bowl of our spiritual body and be present for each other. Dana, Sangha Live would appreciate it, and we sure would too. Because if we have 3 part-time staff people, 1 in Egypt, 1 in Canada, and we've got 1 in North Carolina. So we would really appreciate your support. We're particularly inspired right now because we have a program next year for under 30-year-olds, and the program this year is to teach the spiritual mentoring. As part of the program will be to have spiritual mentoring support for the under 30s. So thank you so much. And I think it's Marnie's time to say something. But thanks for being here. It was good seeing friends and a lot of people I've never met. So that's really exciting. I'm gonna turn it back on gallery. I don't know if Marnie's got something. I think we take you off mute so you can make noise together.
Yeah,
But
we'll go
Marnie-
to gallery. I really want to thank you for being here and teaching with us today. And I'm just wondering if you'd say a little bit about the course that we have starting next weekend. I've dropped into the chat, and I will stay on once we log off. I'll go off camera and give a few more minutes so that people could go back up and click on those links I've put in the chat. Just scroll up. So there's one about the course, Be Not Afraid, Embodying Equanimity. And that begins next week. Registration is still open. And so the info page is there. And then the Lotus Institute website and a secure link for Donna. So that's all in the chat. And if you could just say a couple things, and then we'll all just afterwards, we'll all just unmute and be able to say goodbye to each other.
You're on a roll.
Sure. The session on,
It's full.
the next session is on fear. And the approach to fear is the principle of reciprocity. And that means that wherever fear is, non-fear lives. Whether we seize it, whether we step into it, whether we claim it for ourselves is our choice. But fear is a natural human experience again. There are a list of fears from anthropologists that all humans have, like dying, like being hurt physically, mentally. I've had people in consultation talk to me that were the greatest worried they'd lose their mind. I understand that. We all need to understand that. We can lose ourselves. We live long enough now where we're in territory that, as Star Trek will say, no one has gone before. And we're just learning how to be human in this way. We don't have all the solutions. We're right at the frontier of how to live this long and be well. And be well with one another. And be ill with one another. And so this is where for me, we need to reimagine society or our relationships on how we keep each other well. So much of our conditioning is war oriented, is violent oriented, is boundary oriented, that we have little energy left to perceive our great capacity of our interconnection. And I've had the luxury of many experiences around the world where I've seen that boundary disappear naturally, non-contrived connectedness.
So I think we're going to be doing Buddhist practice and then also teachings from neuroscience and specific practices to help resource and stabilize our nervous system. So we're kind of combine our work in trauma, neuroscience, and Buddhism in those 4 weeks. And it will be good. So I think now we say goodbye.